Good morning. Happy Monday to section 12. Hope you guys are doing well wherever you are and ready to get to work. Hopefully, you have received the practice exam, which I sent out via email with the with a rough sense of the scale that I would have used had this been graded. But the good news, or bad, I guess, depends on how you did on the practice exam, is that it doesn't count, right? It's that's a practice. If you like where you were in the distribution, then keep doing what you're doing. If you don't, then take a look again at the sample answer that was provided, and then compare it to yours, and then if necessary, let's get together and figure out how we can get you in a place more like where you want to be. So that's that. You also may have noticed up on Twin are all of the old practice exams, complete with lots of conveyance problems from exams. So you can see like how these show up when it comes to exam time, as well as obviously the essays, which I hope that you'll see are very similar to the essay that we had for the practice exam. Nicole, what's up?
For each of the essays, was it out of the total amount of points that you were basing it off of?
No, I I grade based on accumulated points based on relevance and correctness. So for every if you're in your document, you'll see like all those ones in there. Those are things that I'm accumulating a point for. So um, it's not really out of anything. I was trying to explain it to my son last night, and I said, well, actually, it's out of infinity. And and then he thought y'all scores were very poor because out of infinity, out of infinity, they don't really look that good. Um, but I said, the limitation is there's only so many things that you can say, and there's only so much time that you have, and so those are the limitations. So an extremely comprehensive one scores points beyond even what I would imagine might have been scored. So that's why, in each essay, just to let you know, each essay will be scaled relative to one another. So what y'all, when I showed you that scale, that's not a predetermined thing. That's me looking at what are the scores that I got out of this performance, and how do I need to distribute them in order to fit to the law school's curve. And just about the law school's curve, like the middle of the road is someone who is on their way to probably being a successful lawyer. Okay. And so I want you to keep that in mind, that middle of the road is someone who has got it. It may not be as comprehensive as B plus or an A minus or an A, but the middle of the road scores, which the bulk of you guys are people who get the material and are on the path towards doing well in school, or completing school and becoming an effective lawyer. So that's, if that's your standard, I want you to keep that in mind. I hate that grades, in law school in particular, at our law school, get translated into like what a B minus or a C plus used to be, because probably B minus and C plus used to be like, I'm just projecting because many people who end up in law school have a history of very good academic performance. And so B minus and C plus is not something that you're used to seeing or excited about. But really what it means is you're in the middle of the pack in terms of where you are with a group of people who most of whom are going to go on to be effective and strong lawyers. So just trying to zoom out on the perspective of what grades mean and what they are. And again, this was practice. So, but eventually, just numerically, it's going to happen that the majority of you are going to be in the B minus C plus range. That's just the way that the curve works. And so that doesn't, that was pretty sad pep talk, but hopefully y'all understood what I was saying. Other questions on that? All right. So all I want to do today and maybe even into Wednesday is work through conveyance problems, because this stuff is, it's just tedious and technical. And so the best way to learn it is not to listen to me giving you charts, but rather to do the work yourself in working through some of these problems. And so I would encourage you to utilize the old exams in that regard as well. It might still be a little early to use the old exams because we haven't covered future interests in the level of detail that you would need, but you can at least, I think, start taking glances at the old exams to see the conveyance problems, there. Okay, we good? Other questions? All right. So we got two groups of problems today. And what I'd like to do is walk through the ones on 272 and 273 first, and then kind of open it up to the worksheet and open it up to the worksheet and sort of take them at, there's a few that I definitely want to talk about on the worksheet, but we're probably not going to get to all of them. And so, I'd like for you all to sort of guide me on which ones are the ones that we need to spend time on. Okay. So, and of course, hopefully you noticed the ones in the book have the answers in the back. So, there shouldn't be any surprises as we work through these ones from the book initially. Okay, so, and I'm going to need volunteers, so I want y'all to be ready to participate here. Let's go with this first one on 272 to A and her heirs, but if Blackacre is used for any purpose other than agricultural purposes, then O has the right to re-enter and take possession of the land. The question that they phrase it is, what is the state of title in Blackacre at common law? That sounds, a little convoluted to me. What I'm going to ask you is, who has what interests at the moment of conveyance? Okay. So if someone want to work us through 1 and 2 together, because they go together. So what do we think is the state of title in Blackacre at common law? Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, I'll give it a whirl. So based off the wording with the but if and the right to re-enter, and based on your chart that you gave us, I felt like it was the fee simple subject to conditions subsequent, because with the right to re-enter, it's not an automatic revert. So they would have to take it upon themselves to do that. So at this point, I would say it was the fee simple with the condition subsequent for 1.
So, and who has that?
A. At this point, A.
Okay. And so I'm going to pull up my thing. Let's see. So we see, so Jack is saying A has a, okay. And Jack, what else? What other interests are at play here?
So on 1, it says and her heirs. So the heirs would have the future interest.
Somebody stop him.
Yeah, I'll stop myself. So, or the reversion, or the opportunity.
What is it called? Somebody else. What is the future interest called? When you have a fee simple subject to a condition subsequent, the future interest will always be
Right of entry.
Shelton, what is it?
Right of entry.
Right of entry. Okay, and Jack, why do you want to talk about the and her heirs? What did I tell you all about and her heirs?
It's not necessary.
Yeah, it's irrelevant. You're never going to see it in mine. It just confuses you, just the way that it confused you right there.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it looks like it's a separate conveyance, but really it isn't. It is just a way of capturing that A is getting it, right? And it is not a separate conveyance of any future interest to A's heirs, because A's heirs don't exist. They aren't a thing yet. They won't exist until A passes away. Okay, so I don't know why that showed up red, but we will make it black. And okay, so that's what it is. That's the state of title for this. If we ask who holds what interests, it's this is your answer. Okay, and I just want to note that there is always a point for noting this in fee simple. The harder part is identifying what the interests are, but identifying that the future interest is in fee simple or in whatever it ends up being, is also worth a point as we do these. Okay, so Jack, I'm going to stick with you. Taking the facts of problem 1, suppose that some years after the conveyance, A begins construction of several residences on Blackacre. O has died and devised her entire estate to B. What is the state of title in Blackacre at common law?
So I didn't look in the back of the book for the answers, so sorry if I sound foolish. But
no, that's even better.
Okay.
Because we can all just read the answers. Let's work through it.
Definitely. So, because A is not using the property for what O intended him to use it for in the original conveyance, that instigates the right of re-entry. But since O is dead, he can't do that.
Right.
But also since O gave his entire estate to B, my thinking was that now B has that ability of the re-entry because A only has the fee simple if it abides by O's original conveyance.
Okay. So what I've put up here is B has the right of entry in fee simple, which is correct. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So far so good. Now the question is, who can go on this property right now? Can A go on this property right now?
Yes, because it's not an automatic revert. So A can do it until confronted by B.
Good. And so what would we call the stick that A has? It's a present interest still.
So A still has that the FSSCS. Yeah.
Exactly.
Could you say what that stands for one more time? Sorry about that. The
fee simple subject to conditions subsequent.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So this is it. So nothing has changed from A's perspective, except that the door has been unlocked for the future interest holder to come in and take it at any moment. Okay. And as Jack has said, B is the interest holder, the future interest holder here now. It's not O, it was O, then O passed, and they passed this right of entry down to B until B takes action. Then the state of title remains pretty much the same, right? The only difference here is that B is standing in for O. Okay? Questions on this one? Remember, when I'm in share screen, I can't see y'all's faces, so you got to do the blue hand if you do have a question. Okay, let's do number 3 and 4. Very similar. O conveys Blackacre to A and her heirs so long as Blackacre is used for residential purposes only. What is the state of title in Blackacre at common law? So who wants to walk us through this one? Number 3 and number 4. All right, go for it, Jasky.
All right, so with number 3, O conveys Blackacre to A. So we have A having a fee simple determinable. And then we have O having the reverter.
What do we call it?
Uh,
It's close.
the remainder.
No, it's reverter is in there, but it's incomplete. Shelton, you got this one too?
Possibility of reverter.
Possibility of reverter.
Okay.
I know that we don't believe that something could be called a possibility of something, but that is the proper name for the interest. Okay. So if, let's say, you put on your final that O has a reverter, unfortunately, because I'm nice, I'm probably going to give you a half point for that. But unfortunately, it's really wrong. There is no such thing as a reverter. It's a possibility of a reverter. And so that is the stick. So use that chart. It tells you what you have. If you have a fee simple determinable, you will have a possibility of reverter, and this possibility of reverter is in fee simple. Okay, so good, Jasky, you're on it. So what had you know that it was a fee simple determinable?
The fact that the fact that after they explained what the property was to be used for, so the condition, then there was no other language about like the right to re-enter or like inclusion of another person.
Okay, good. So there was no inclusion of another person, so that means it was not a fee simple subject to an executory limitation. Good. So how did you know then that it was not a fee simple subject to conditions subsequent, like the one in number 1?
Because it didn't state that O has to do anything to take it back.
Okay. I don't know that that necessarily would be the case. So I think it's actually easier than this. What else is in there? Someone else, what else is in there that lets us know that it's a fee simple determinable and not a fee simple subject to conditions subsequent? Yeah, Brandon.
The language that's so long, I'm sorry.
Yep. Go for it. Say it, Jasky.
So the language that's so long, so long as Blackacre is used for residential purposes.
It's that so long as, right? So you identified correctly that we need to know that the future interest wasn't given to someone else. That knocks out this fee simple subject to executory limitation, but we're stuck with these two. How do we know which one is which? A so long as is going to be a fee simple determinable. Okay, as opposed to number 1, which is a but if, that is a fee simple subject to condition subsequent. Okay.
Ooh.
Okay. So let's do number 4. Taking the facts of problem 3, suppose that some years after the conveyance, A begins construction of a factory on Blackacre. O has died and devised her entire estate to B. So it's a very similar situation to numbers 1 and 2, but we're going to see the distinction here. What is the state of title in Blackacre at common law after that has happened?
Okay, so with the same fact pattern, then A had the fee simple determinable, but because they started constructing a factory, they breached that.
Correct.
But O is dead, but they devised their entire estate to B, so now B has the fee simple.
Boom. Excellent. Okay. And we knew it was going to be a fee simple. That's what this is telling us. Okay. O's interest, when it was a future interest, if it was ever going to become possessory, right, at the moment of defeasance, then it was going to become possessory in the form of a fee simple. Okay. And the difference, of course, is that in the first example, action had to be taken before the future interest holder got that fee simple, whereas here it happens automatically. As soon as the moment of defeasance occurs, the future interest becomes possessory and in the form of a fee simple. So I'm using this language, and I want y'all to, I'm going to just make a couple of special notes. Like when I say a future interest becomes possessory, what I'm meaning is that there are all these future interests over here on this side of the chart. That at that time, Jasky, let me ask you this. Before the property, before the construction of the factory on the property, can O or B or any future interest holder, can they go on the property? Can they enter?
No.
No. If they do, what will they be?
Trespassing.
Trespassing. Okay, so they have no present right to possession. They cannot enter this property. So they do not have a possessory interest. They only have a future interest. And so as long as you're on this side of the chart, if your interest is on this side of the chart, then you have a future interest and not any interest that will allow you to enter the property. However, the future interest is potentially going to become possessory. That means at some point, something could happen that could allow you to enter the property. In this instance, we have a possibility of reverter that if the moment of defeasance occurs, right, the X, or in this instance, the not being used for residential purposes, when X happens, then these future interests become possessory. They switch over. Hopefully y'all can see the mouse. I'm doing a nice little rainbow here. From the future interest over to the possessory interest. They become possessory at the moment of defeasance, or a life estate, a future interest attached to a life estate becomes possessory at the conclusion of the life estate. Okay. And so when they become possessory, they will have to be in some form like this. One of these five. That's it. Okay. And so that is what I'm denoting with this in fee simple. When they become possessory, this is the form they are going to take. Okay. And then Jasky's right. It is a fee simple. Okay, I'm going to pause here. How are we with 1 through 4? Yeah, Sarah.
Okay, I get this answer and why it is such, but I don't know if this is related to this or not, but on 246, there's a footnote and just saying that right of entry and possibility of reverter may not be created in a transferee. Can you explain that? Because I at first took it as like the answer to 4 would have been O's heirs have instead of B, but I get that that possibility of reverter can be divisible by will if the state allows it. So what is may not be created in a transferee? What does that mean?
That's what it says. The possibility of reverter and the right of entry cannot be created in a transferee.
Right, yeah, they may be retained only by the transferor or his heirs.
Right. Okay. So the key word in that sentence is created. So note the distinction between these two, the fee simple determinable and the fee simple subject to conditions subsequent, which leave the future interest, right? So in these two examples, to A and her heirs, so long as Blackacre is used for residential purposes only. As Jasky said, there was no giveaway of that future interest. It was retained. Or in number 1, to A and her heirs, but if Blackacre is used for any purpose other than agricultural purposes, then O, the grantor, has the right to re-enter. So again, the future interest is retained, okay? So both of these, sort of a primary characteristic of both of them is that the future interest is retained. The alternative would be if these said something closer to what you see in this kind of in this kind of interest. To A, so long as used for residential purposes, and if not used for residential purposes, then to B.
Okay.
Okay.
It just means
So
that.
if you create the future interest in a third party, it's always going to be this fee simple subject to an executory limitation. Now, what I think you're asking is, how could it be in either number one or number two or number four, really, that B, who you would classify, Sarah, am I correct? You would classify that person as a transferee,
I guess.
right? Is this what you're asking?
Sure. Yeah, I guess.
How could someone else have these possibilities of reverter or rights of entry? And the answer is that though they were created and kept by the grantor and not a transferee, the grantor has subsequently, in this instance, died and left them to someone else. Is that clearing things up or making things worse?
Yeah, I mean, I get that like most states allow them; they are divisible by will. I guess I didn't know what created and a transferee meant, but those they're different.
Yeah, so I think I would make a distinction between created and a transferee and P of R and R of E can be transferred. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit with the Marenholtz case, how there was that statute that screwed everything up that said that these cannot be transferred, right? And then if you recall on Wednesday, I said that statute messed this whole case up, and in all jurisdictions that I know of, these can be transferred. But I guess what I'm trying to make the distinction about is that they cannot be created in a transferee, but they can be transferred to a transferee.
Okay. Yes. That was my
Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
So Professor,
Okay.
just so I'm understanding that, so basically you're saying that the right is created and then it's always originally held by the original grantor, and then it can be transferred, but you're saying that the language is just saying that if you don't create that, like you can't transfer something that, or you can't create it later, basically?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And in fact, before I go to these other hands, I want to go to problem 2 from the worksheet, okay? Because it actually is this exact same point, just with a reversion instead of a possibility of reverter, okay? So in that one, it says on March 9th, or on March 1st, Julia conveyed 10 acres to Gloria for life. What does that create? Somebody work through it with me.
So that would be a life estate
For
Gloria's life, I think.
right. So Gloria has the life estate. And what else? What other interests are here?
And then after Gloria dies, I guess there's the reversion that Julia keeps, or
Yeah, I say oh, but you're right. It's Julia. Okay. So hopefully that was good for everybody. Hopefully everybody gets to Gloria for life, creates a life estate and a reversion. Okay. Then what happens here is the next day, Julia conveyed her entire remaining interest to Sydney and her heirs. Okay. So first of all, what interest, David, I've seen your hand pop up a couple times to try to jump in. What interest does Julia have to convey to Sydney at that particular time on March 2nd?
The reversion in fee simple.
The reversion in fee simple. Okay. So when it says on March 2nd, Julia conveyed her entire remaining interest to Sydney, what does that leave the state of title as? What interest now?
Gloria still has the life estate, but Sydney now has reversion in fee simple.
And so, Sarah, I don't know if you're doing this actually, but I'm going to assert that what you're doing is saying, wait a second, a reversion can only be held by the grantor or the grantor's estate. How could, in this example, Sydney, a third party and a transferee, how could she be holding a reversion? Wouldn't that be a remainder, right? Like if it had said instead of this, David, if it had said, then what would be created? David.
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
It's Glory for Life, then Sydney. I think that'd be the life estate again. Sorry, I'm going back to my chart here. Would reversion and fee simple still go to Julia and then the remainder to Sydney?
What reversion are you seeing? Where are you seeing a reversion?
I might be overcomplicating it then. Remainder and fee simple to Sydney, right?
Yeah, there's no reversion here.
Okay.
Julia has given away the life estate, the present interest, and the future interest. There's nothing left for Julia. As opposed to up here, there is something left for Julia. Okay. So if we did it all in one conveyance to Gloria for life, then to Sydney, it would be Gloria has the life estate, Sydney has a remainder. However, since we did it in two steps on that problem, when it was created, it was a life estate and a reversion. And then the second conveyance happens. Julia gives the future interest to Sydney. It's still called a reversion. Note that functionally, there's no difference between a reversion and a remainder. It's just labeling. But to the point I think Jaski just made is when it is created, it takes its name. If it gets transferred later, it keeps that name, even though generally a reversion can only be held by the grantor or the grantor's estate. Once it's created, it can be transferred and it's still called a reversion. Okay? All right. Back to questions on the other ones. Ryan.
When you have a reversion and a remainder, and you are going from future interest to possessory interest, will it always go to a fee simple?
No.
No. Okay.
Oh, no. All right. We've actually seen a version of this elsewhere. So, Ryan, let's work through that one.
Okay, to A for life, A has the life estate.
Okay, that's easy.
Then to B for life, so B would have the third party remainder. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Life and the life estate.
In life estate. Because when A passes and the remainder becomes possessory, what form does it become?
When A passes and it becomes possessory, it would become a life estate.
A life estate for B. Okay. And you can see, so like if you just kind of make this go away, then all you're seeing is to A for life, then to C.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so you can kind of see that is how you would do a future interest that would become possessory in something other than fee simple. Okay. So if it had said, and then compare it to this, to B for life, then to C, that to C looks like what?
The remainder in the life estate.
Mm-hmm. So C has what?
Another remainder.
Mm-hmm. And it is in
life estate.
Mm,
It's not in life estate. Oh, they would have the fee simple at that point because then it's done.
right.
Okay.
It is always going to ultimately have to end up being a fee simple.
Okay.
Okay, that's one of those rules that we're going to cover about future interests that says you can't have the dead hand control forever. So eventually, it's going to be held by fee simple by someone.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Brandon.
Yes. In the example we did, O dies and he gives his entire estate to B, and then I believe it was A who uses the land for a construction site. So in that example, the reverter went back to O. So when O died and gave his estate to B, B basically replaced O as the reverter. And since it was a fee simple determinable, it was automatic when they used the land for a construction site that it wasn't theirs anymore. Is that right or wrong?
That's exactly right, except say possibility of reverter instead of reverter.
Okay, thank you.
Other than that, that is exactly right. We good? Other questions on 1 through 4 or those little bonus things that we threw in? Yeah, Sarah.
For 2, did you say the answer is Sydney has remainder in life estate for the lifespan of Gloria's life? Is that the answer?
Oh, on number 2 from the thing.
From the sheet.
Sydney has, this is the answer.
Reversion.
Gloria has a life estate. Sydney has a reversion in fee simple.
Okay. That makes more sense. Thank you.
Okay. Let's do number 5 in the book number 5. All right. O conveys Greenacre to the Finger Lakes Land Trust on condition that Greenacre remain forever undeveloped and in its natural condition. In the event Greenacre is ever developed residentially, commercially, or otherwise, then to the Land Conservancy in fee simple absolute. What is the state of title in Greenacre at common law? Brandon and Sarah, I see your hands up, but I'm guessing that those are just leftover hands, unless y'all want to do number 5 with us. You want to do it, Sarah?
Mine was left over, but yes, I can do it.
Okay.
Okay, I have that Finger Lakes has fee simple subject to executory limitation. And then Land Conservancy has executory interest in fee simple absolute.
Great. How do you know that what Finger Lakes has is a fee simple subject to an executory limitation?
Because they transferred their right of entry to the other company afterwards.
Great. They transferred the future interest, right? Whenever the future interest is given away in a defeasible fee of any sort, whenever the future interest is given away to someone else, you're looking at a fee simple subject to executory limitation. So to the Finger Lakes Trust, blah, 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 blah. And if not, then to someone else. As soon as you see that then to someone else baked into the original conveyance language, you know you are looking at a fee simple subject to an executory limitation. Sarah, let me ask you, what about if there was a subsequent question that says Finger Lakes Land Trust starts to develop residences on this property? Then what would the state of title be?
Then it would go to the other company.
So Land Conservancy in what form?
Fee simple.
Fee simple. Great. And we knew it was going to be fee simple because I set it up here in fee simple. Actually, you said it in fee simple. Okay. And that's because fee simple subject to executory limitation functions with the automatic future interest becoming possessory at the moment of defeasance. Okay. That's one of those sentences that, you know, you really realize you're a law professor, right? You say something and it makes perfect sense that the future interest becomes possessory automatically at the moment of defeasance. And hopefully y'all are understanding that sentence. Okay, with a fee simple subject to an executory limitation, it's automatic. Good? Questions on number 5? David?
Yeah, I'm just having a little trouble with executory limitation. Could you do another example of that?
So here is the difference. What do you want the condition to be? Let's do school purposes. Okay. What's that, David?
For as long as that looks like subject to condition subsequent. I may be wrong.
You're wrong.
Yeah.
So long as.
Oh, it's determinable.
Okay. So A has a fee simple determinable in that example. And there's nothing in there that says what's happening to the future interest, but we know that it's being retained. Okay, so just compare. What's the difference? What has changed between this one and this one?
It's the and if not used for school purposes, saying that is the only way this land could be used.
Okay, well, but that's still the case up here, right? It
Yeah.
can only be used for school purposes up here. So from A's perspective, this actually makes no difference what this is. Okay, A can do the exact same thing, whether it's a fee simple determinable like it is up here, or whether it's a fee simple subject to an executory limitation like it is down here. So from A's standpoint, these two conveyances are identical. They can use it for school purposes only. The trick is that when it stops being used for school purposes, then we have, you know, the effect is the same, but the identity of who's holding that future interest is different.
Okay.
So in this example, it's retained. O retains the future interest. I'm just going to put that, right? And in fact, it's possibility. Reverter. Here, O has given away the future interest. And so David has an executory interest in fee simple.
Okay.
That's the difference.
Okay.
Here
I see that.
it's
I see that now.
retained. Here it's given away. Okay, so as y'all work through the chart, sometimes it's easiest to, maybe the first thing you should check is, has the future interest been given away, right? So assuming that you're not in a life estate or a fee simple, right? So you're in one of these defeasible fees. So you've narrowed it down to it's one of those three. Maybe the first thing you check is, has the future interest been given away? If the answer to that question is yes, then you know what you have. You are looking at a fee simple subject to an executory limitation. If the answer to that question is no, then you have to distinguish between these two, a fee simple determinable and a fee simple subject to condition subsequent. That's where we do our language of duration versus language of condition thing. So our how to create is going to be crucial. Okay, so maybe check this first. If it is given away, right? If it's this kind of example where the future interest has been given away at the moment of conveyance, then you know what you're looking at. You can just stop right there. But if it's not, then we need to do the whole so long as or on condition that whole thing. Is that helpful? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Others before we go on to number 6. All right. Number 6, O conveys wiseacre to A and her heirs, and A promises on behalf of her heirs and assigns forever that that wiseacre shall be used solely for agricultural purposes. What is the state of title in wiseacre at common law? JC, are you wanting to answer? Or you have a question about this?
Yeah, I was hoping to answer this one.
Okay, go ahead.
So A has fee simple with the covenant.
Right. And so for this semester, we're just saying A has fee simple because we're not talking about covenants yet. What I'm going to say is A has fee simple, and this language, A promises, that's not relevant for us for the state of title. This promise is a promise. And JC, when you hear promise, what class do you think of?
Contracts.
Contracts, okay? And so what we're talking about here is a fee simple conveyance to A, and then a contract that binds A and the grantor, but doesn't really apply beyond the two of them, okay? We'll talk in the spring about how you might be able to bind future owners by having a covenant attached to property, as opposed to this, which I'm just going to call a promise that is enforceable like a contract. Okay, so the main point from number 6 is if you don't see the magic language, so long as, on condition that, blah, 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 then you're not looking at a defeasible fee. Okay, if you see other mumbo jumbo about promises or I'll never do this or whatever, you're just looking at a fee simple and then some sort of side agreement that the grantor and grantee have just between the two of them, okay? The reason that's important is because at this point, all we're focusing in on is the property rights, okay? All we're focusing in on is the property rights. And the property rights here are A has a fee simple. And if they don't use it for agricultural purposes, well, or they want to sell it to someone who doesn't use it for agricultural purposes, well, there's no stopping that sale. And in fact, the only way in which you would stop the use would be through some sort of contract action as opposed to a property action. So if we're identifying sticks are not affected by promises. They are only affected by language in the conveyance itself, so long as on condition that, for life, etc. Okay? So number 6 is kind of a trick question. Other questions on 6? I've already answered 7, which is about what happens if it occurs, right? There could be a damages action, there might be an injunction, it's all contract law. We good? All right. Let's do 8. And then we'll go to the worksheet. O conveys wiseacre to A and his heirs. But if A ever drinks alcohol or alcoholic beverages, then to B and her heirs. What are we looking at here? So note that I'm stopping you before I give these extra facts, okay? Because the extra facts are sometimes going to confuse you if you try to go too quickly and incorporate all of it into one. You should always look at the conveyance, identify the interests, then look at the subsequent facts, identify how the interests might change. Okay? So that should be your process. And in fact, usually on the exam, I actually force you to stop at this point, right? I say, here's the conveyance, what interests are created. So I will now force you to stop. To A, but if A ever drinks alcohol or alcoholic beverages, then to B. What are we looking at here? Yeah, Tierney.
I'm going to go with fee simple subject to executory limitation.
Which is held by?
A has, oh, by by A, and B has the executory interest.
In fee
Thank you.
simple. Good. Okay, and how do you know it?
Through the language, even though, I mean, it is a but if, but yeah, so it's 2A. So on condition that she doesn't drink alcohol, but if she does, then it goes to B.
Right. And it's that last thing that you said that makes it clear that it's a fee simple subject to an executory limitation. So just like in my little dialogue just a minute ago with David, it's the key thing is that the future interest is given away. Future interest given away, that means it's a fee simple subject to an executory limitation. And Tierney, you've got it right that B has the executory interest in fee simple. All right, so then B executes and delivers a deed purporting to convey her interest in Whiteacre to C. Okay, so Tierney, what do you think happens with that? Whoa.
Executes and deliver a deed. So does that just mean that C now has the executory interest?
That's all it means. Okay, so A is still here, and now C has B's old executory interest. Okay, and then after that, something else happens. A drinks whiskey and doesn't just drink the whiskey, also gets drunk. Now, what is the state of title?
C just gets the executory interest in fee simple.
Okay, but it stops being an executory interest, right? Because the moment of defeasance has occurred.
Oh, so it's fee simple.
Great. Okay. Perfect. Questions on this one? Tommy.
For exam purposes, when we're going through these questions, we won't ever have to like argue whether or not someone with executory interest can prove that the other party broke the agreement or
Right.
the conditions.
Right. In the conveyance questions, it's not going to be ambiguous about whether or not the moment of defeasance has occurred. So like the conversation that we had a little bit on last week about whether if they put the IKEA on the plot, whether that would be school purposes, you know, if they were using that money for the science lab or whatever. So too, we're not going to say like, we're not going to have ambiguity about what I'm trying to create. So we're not going to, in the conveyance portion, you're not going to have the rules of construction. You're not going to have the ambiguity about the moment of defeasance. You're not going to have proof problems. All of those things are fair game in the essays, but not in the conveyance part. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if we had an essay on like conveyance, say like this question, would we need to discuss like whether or not C can prove that A ever drank alcohol?
It's hard for me to universally answer that question. My guess, though, is that the answer is no. That's not going to likely be what I'm asking you to do in an essay question, right? You don't have to prove that, like, for example, I've got the practice exam in my mind, and remember it was like a trophy lost on the floor of a nail salon. You don't have to prove that, you know, like if I give you a fact, like the trophy was standing upright, you don't have to say, but they'll have to prove that the trophy was standing upright. Is that making sense? So like if I give you a fact like this, A drinks whiskey and gets drunk, you can presume that it can be proven.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Other questions on these? All right, let's switch over to the worksheets. And who's got a problem with one of them?
Could we discuss number 5? My colleagues and I were going back and forth about, I guess, how the conveyance should be, I guess, worded. Some of us got hung up on the fact that he said he was conveying the land to Manny to build a baseball park, and others were stuck on the fact that the moment of defeasance wasn't until his heirs decided that it wasn't used, the land wasn't used in a manner in which he would be happy with. So I guess, like, what would be the language for the conveyance?
Well, I think that, so this is this kind of question, and I think maybe the very last one, kind of demonstrate that lawyers can do things different ways, right? So there are multiple ways in which you might accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. And so the job for an estate planning lawyer is to know the different options and to, you know, give sort of the pros and cons of the various options and set it up. So there's a few different ways in which you could accomplish this for number 5. There's no like right answer. So Tierney, what did I guess maybe what was your first instinct in order to create this?
Okay, so we decided that it was a fee simple subject to executory limitation, and the language that I decided to go with was too many on condition that the land is used in a way Pedro would be happy with, but if not, then to Pedro's heirs.
For the baseball fans among you, you can imagine the era in which I wrote this particular question, and maybe where I was physically. Okay, and so you think that creates and then I'm sorry, you also said, and if not, then to whom?
Pedro's heirs.
Okay, so, and you said that's a fee simple subject to an executory limitation. Now, here's a problem with this particular iteration of it. I think it's all good up until this point, right? So you're putting the moment of defeasance attached, not just to use as a baseball diamond, but also potentially to be used for anything that Pedro would want, okay? The potential problem with this is that the identification of Pedro's heirs in the conveyance. So does Pedro have heirs yet?
I don't know.
When will Pedro have heirs?
Oh, when he dies.
When he dies, okay? And so it sometimes becomes complicated when you include a language like this, then to Pedro's heirs, in a conveyance, because we can't identify who those people are. So let's say that what happens is Manny starts to use it in a way that Pedro would not like, okay? Then who would take this property? If Pedro was still alive, who would take the property under this conveyance if Manny broke the condition?
Would it be Pedro? Pedro will get it. No, I don't know.
Well, it says Pedro's heirs.
Right.
So,
but he doesn't have heirs because he's still alive.
Right. So that's the problem with this part. So who would you want to get the property in that instance?
Pedro. If he's still alive, Pedro should get it back.
Right. So then you might just say, instead of this, back to Pedro. But of course, if you're giving it, let's play that out. So if Pedro is alive and Manny breaks the condition, where does the property go? In this new version.
It goes to Pedro.
Right. And if Pedro is dead and Manny breaks the condition, then where does it go?
To his heirs.
Goes to his heirs. So you see why this version is better than the original that you had.
Right. And it also changes the possessory interest, and it's gonna be fee simple subject, to conditions subsequent.
Good. Okay. And so that creates a situation in which Pedro can decide, right? Remember, the right of entry doesn't happen automatically. It puts it into the situation where Pedro can evaluate at that time, do I really want to get this property back or not? Okay, so I think a lot of people's first instinct in this is to create a fee simple subject to condition subsequent with a right of entry held by Pedro, which when Pedro passes will pass into his estate. Okay, so I think that is a right answer. Anybody else have any suggestions of other than creating a fee simple subject to condition subsequent that you might do? So Tierney, is that, well, before I ask for someone else, Tierney, is that, are you feeling better about this one?
Yes, we first decided that it was a fee simple subject to condition subsequent, but then we changed it because we got hung up on the baseball park language and then the language about not being used in a way that Pedro wasn't happy with.
Yeah, so you used in a way Pedro would be happy with, but I think that this would work just as well. Okay, and that would do, in fact, the exact same thing. Okay. It would just make the moment of defeasance a little more specific, because used in a way Pedro would be happy with is a little hard to define and ambiguous. Used as a baseball park, a little easier. But functionally, these would be somewhat similar. They would both create a situation in which Pedro or eventually Pedro's heirs would have the discretion to come in if Manny started using the park in some other kind of way.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, other options, right? Beyond just saying we are going to create a fee simple subject to condition subsequent.
Well, Professor, just real quick. So me and Tierney were in the same kind of study group. So I was of the mind of the second or the latter version and more to the baseball park. So you're saying that, so the fact that it's a condition subsequent with the right of entry means that he doesn't have to write if he starts using it in a way other than that, then all that other stuff, because that's given by the right of entry.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the right of entry, remember, doesn't happen automatically, right? So it's the grantor or the grantor's estate has to take action. So once it stops being used as a baseball park, well, then Pedro can say, well, I actually like for it to be used as a, I don't know, IKEA, right? I like that. And so I'm not going to exercise my right of entry. Or the heirs can come to that conclusion. Pedro would have loved IKEA. And so we're going to allow it to, we're going to allow this to continue and not exercise our right of entry. So I think either of those would be fine, right? I kind of prefer this one because I think that the use as a baseball park is more specific and less open to interpretation, right? Especially once Pedro is gone. But I don't think that, I think either of these might work. could work. What do you do if you want there to be flexibility? Think, guys. If we want flexibility, then what is our tool to achieve flexibility? Abby.
Wouldn't it a trust?
A trust. Okay. Why do we like a trust? What does it allow us to do? Abby, I'm looking at you. I know you can't see where I'm looking.
Sorry, I was flipping through my notes.
That's okay. I mean, you got the right answer. So another instinct here would be to make it to whomever, maybe to Pedro's kids in trust.
Doesn't it split the legal and equitable interest, and that's why it's more flexible?
Yeah. Okay. So the kids would always be the fee simple holders, legal fee simple holders of this property. Okay. But Manny would be the trust beneficiary so long as this is the case. Okay. Or you could draft the trust. There's like, you know, I can't put up all the different ways in which this trust could be drafted, right? We're not really in a trust drafting course, but this is just to introduce the idea that in addition to doing exactly what we've talked about up here, which is really more consistent with what we are doing in this course, this is an appropriate situation for a trust to be created because it's going to create that flexibility that that Abby is talking about. JC, I saw your hand up as well. Were you going to throw something in here?
I was answering a different question, I think.
Okay, got it. Okay, so another option for number 5 might be a trust. Other questions on 5? Note that I don't think that I have ever on an exam asked you to draft a conveyance that does something for someone. I think it's a useful practice, but it's very difficult to grade it as right or wrong because there's usually a lot of different ways for it to be correct. Okay, others on the worksheet.
Oh, yeah, Professor. The one before that also I found a bit confusing. Number 4.
Number 4. Let's do it. In 2000, the Acme Steel Company sells the site of a defunct factory to Andrew for life, remainder to Beatrice. Okay, so remember what we always do is we stop ourselves before we get confused with all these subsequent facts. So to Andrew for life, remainder to Beatrice. Charles, what does that create?
Andrew has a life estate and Beatrice has a future interest.
And what is that future interest?
The thing that it's the forever, the forever one. The fee simple.
Okay, it's in fee simple. That's right, but we still got to call it something. It's attached to a life estate are 2 different types of future interest that follow a life estate. There's a reversion and a remainder. So I've already put the RE. I know we're going to say an RE word.
Yeah, she's got
We're
remainder.
going to say reversion or remainder.
Yeah, she's got remainder.
Right. It's in fact there in the conveyance itself. Okay. So this is a life estate with a remainder to Beatrice. Okay. So what happens next? 10 months later, Andrew sells his interest to Cooper. Okay. So Charles, what happens? Well, first of all, what does Andrew have?
Andrew has a life estate.
And so what can Andrew sell?
A life estate.
And so when he conveys his interest to Cooper, what does he convey to Cooper?
He's giving Cooper the life estate per Archer V for Andrew's life.
Great. Okay. And who else still has interest in this property at that point?
Beatrice still has her remainder.
Good. All right. Alas, Cooper dies of a mysterious illness in December 2002. So now Cooper is dead. So what happened?
Yeah, and this is the part where the confusion began.
So well, I'll slow it down the same way. What did Cooper have?
Well, he has the life estate.
Life estate for Andrew's life.
Right.
And so when does that end?
When Andrew dies.
Great. And so what is Cooper's death due to that stick?
Does it send it back to Andrew?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Right. Well, what is it? First of all, forget. So I think you're answering. Your answer suggests that you know that something happens to the stick. Who holds it changes, right? Because Cooper can't hold it anymore. But what about to the stick itself? Does the color of the stick, the nature of the stick, does the stick change at all?
Yeah, no. So does that it has to go to his heirs, doesn't it?
Whose heirs?
Cooper's.
Okay. Cooper's estate has the life estate for Andrew's life. So Andrew is out on this. When Andrew sells his interest, Andrew is done. Unless Andrew says, I'm conveying a life estate in my life estate, right? So Cooper can have my life estate for life, which is conceivable to create, but isn't on these facts. Okay. Unless Andrew retains something for Andrew's self, then Andrew is out. And if Andrew is out, then when Cooper dies, Andrew's not coming back in. Okay, so it's Cooper's estate. So it might be Cooper's heirs if Cooper doesn't, or anyone that Cooper has identified in Cooper's will, or if Cooper, doesn't have will or heirs, then where would it go, Charles?
I'm sorry, if Cooper doesn't have heirs?
No heirs, no will.
So then does it escheat to the state?
It would escheat. It could. So this could conceivably escheat to the state. And then the question is, Andrew and Beatrice are both alive. Who owns the present possessory interest in the land? Answer is we don't really know. It's Cooper's estate, right? Cooper's estate has it. So it's what if Cooper's estate includes a will that says everything goes to Charles, then Charles has the life estate. If Cooper doesn't have a will that says that, then Cooper's heirs have the life estate. And if Cooper doesn't have the will or the heirs, then the state has the life estate. And this is still there at that particular time. Does that work, Charles?
Yes.
Great.
As a practical matter, I'm just really curious about, I don't know, maybe I'm sympathetic to Beatrice's position here. If the third situation happens where it escheats to the state, like in the real world where that happens, I mean, if you're the state, do you give it to Beatrice? I mean, that would seem
Yes.
like the right thing. Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah.
You would either, I mean, the state can do whatever they want with it,
Yeah.
but I think normally you would want to unify the present and future interests and just let Beatrice go ahead and have it now. Which
Thanks.
makes sense also if you think about the intent of the grantor in the first place, right? They wanted Andrew to have it for life, but Andrew is obviously out on this. It doesn't seem like they have any interest in the state having it until Andrew dies. And so it would make sense for the state to go ahead and unify the present and future interests. And when that happens, Beatrice would have fee simple. All right, we're at 11:15. Let's keep going with these problems on Wednesday. And we might turn to some of the introductory material on future interests as well. Okay, but I'd like to spend as much time as we need to spend on doing the problems on Wednesday. Okay. All right. I will see you guys Wednesday. Have a good rest of your Monday.
Quick question, Professor.
Yes.
When we're answering this on the exam, is this shorthand good enough, or do we have to? Okay.
This is good enough.
I also have a question. Oops,
Yes.
sorry. Is this what our next quiz is gonna be over? Is similar questions as these?
You know, those quizzes are going to be the bane of my existence. So if you just stay tuned on the quiz. If there's not another quiz, if I haven't put something together by Friday, then I'm just gonna give up and say the quizzes are not happening, and the first quiz didn't count. So so that decision will be made in the next 4 days.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Charles, you got a question?